you are at in the world. Cheryl and I welcome you to the Life Changing Truth broadcast. And today we want to talk about and being ready for the things that are coming on the earth. And a couple of years ago, I put out, actually 3 years ago, I put out several prophetic words about things that were going to be coming to pass that the Lord had spoken to me. And one of the things that the Lord had warned me about is that if President Trump was to get into office, that the church would simply sit back down, kick back, and act like they're in the movie theater with reclining seats. And basically, that's what's going on. This is the 7th month of the year, 2025. Today is 7/7, July the 7th, 2025. And I just want to share a couple of verses with you about what the Lord is speaking. And during my normal reading, my normal study in the Word of God, the Lord keeps speaking to me about the church that's asleep, and that something major is going to have to happen in order to wake up the church. Now, unfortunately, these things that are going on around the world, it's not God's judgment, but the Lord spoke to me that in Romans chapter 8, it talked about the earth groaning in travail, and it's the Apostle Paul was saying that the earth itself, the earnest expectation of the creature, which is talking about creation. But in verse 21, it says the creation itself shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption. So right now the earth is in a bondage of corruption. And it says in verse 22, we know that the whole creation groans together and travails in pain together until now. So I want you to know that right now the earth is in pain. The earth is travailing, it's groaning, just like maybe a woman who is about to give birth to a baby, and is in tremendous pain and labor. Right now the earth is in tremendous pain. It's travailing, it's groaning, it's rumbling, and this is why we see volcanoes blowing up. We see earthquakes around the world. The earth is trembling. Just yesterday from Oklahoma here, I was noticing my coffee, and there was nothing moving in the trailer, but I noticed the coffee was moving, and it's tremors. There are tremors, and what's happening is it's not God. It's simply the time period of history that we're living in, that the earth is in pain. It is groaning. It is travailing. It is under the pressure, under the bondage of absolute corruption in the world. There is absolute lawlessness, absolute wickedness all over America, all over the world. We see that, people in America do not want law. They want lawlessness. They don't want rules. They don't want regulations. And unfortunately, the church is really not doing a whole lot about it because they don't know what to do. People are simply going to church. I think that everyone in the country, most people know that there are some major things happening, that things have accelerated to the point where people are in shock and in awe at what's going on, and people are, everything is sensationalized, and what we saw last, the next thing that we see has to be bigger and worse or whatever, and we're just glued to the screen. And I'm glad that maybe you're watching today, but I want to share a couple of things with you. There's a couple of verses of scripture. I want to show you something that the Lord showed me. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to look at some verses of scripture in Genesis chapter 5 and also in Genesis chapter 6. And I want to point out a couple of things because Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 39, he said, "But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." So Jesus compares to his return just like the days of Noah. And it says, "For as in the days of Noah that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man." Now, many of you have heard that. A lot of pastors are talking about it, but I want to point something out to you, okay? I want to point something out to you that probably no one has seen, is that Jesus compared the end of days and his return to the days of Noah. Now, before the flood came and took everybody away, Noah had a family. It says in Genesis chapter 5, verse 32, Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Noah actually was married. He was eating and drinking, but he had a family. Now, Jesus said in the days before the return of the Son of Man, they will be just like in the days of Noah. They will be eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage. But I want to point out that Noah also was married. So there's nothing wrong with being married. There's nothing wrong with living your life. But what was the difference? What was the difference? Noah was married. Well, the difference is that he and his entire family were working and doing what God told them to do. Okay, this is the difference, and I want to point this out to you. There's nothing wrong with marrying. There's nothing wrong with having a wife and having a family, raising a family. The only difference between Noah and the rest of the world is that nobody else was doing what God told them to do. That's what the difference is. Noah had a family, and I want to point out here in Genesis chapter 7 and verse 6, Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. So in other words, the day that it started raining and the fountains of the earth were busted up and the windows of heaven opened, Noah was 600 years old. And I want to point out again in Genesis 5 there that Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So there's a 100-year period here between the time that Noah had his children and the time that the flood actually came. So there's a 100-year period, and it doesn't say exactly how old Noah was when God appeared to him, but it was sometime in that period. So I want you to know, sometimes we think that because in Genesis chapter 6, it talks about that God said, "My spirit will not always strive with man, for yet his days shall be 120 years." So in other words, God gave a prophecy that the end of mankind, as the world knew it, would be years. That's when the flood came. But I want to point out, Noah had triplets. Shem, Ham, and Japheth were triplets. He had them all in the same year. You can't have 3 children in 1 year. So these were all triplets. And 100 years later, the flood came. So I want you to understand that the children of Noah, the only thing that they knew was God's will. So not only was Noah building the ark and doing exactly, if you go read Genesis chapter 6, it says that he did exactly what the Lord had asked him to do. He did exactly what God told him to do. He built the ark exactly, precisely the way that God told him to do it. But he was also teaching his children to do the will of God. Okay, Noah did not put his children in school somewhere And there's nothing wrong with doing that. But I want to tell you, my brothers and my sisters, is that this was the only difference between Noah and his family and the rest of the earth. And I want to ask that question: what's the difference between you and the rest of the world? There's nothing wrong with being married and raising a family, but so Noah had 1 year. He had to raise a family, and it says that when Noah entered into the ark, his 3 sons actually had wives. So Noah had to raise his sons up in the Lord. He had to teach them to work, and they helped him build the ark and actually got married. So in other words, the point behind this is that everything that you need comes from doing the exact will of God. And Noah was able to do it. Noah was a preacher of righteousness, the Apostle Peter says. So he was preaching. It says in Hebrews chapter 11 that he condemned the world. He was moved with fear and prepared his family and built an ark so that he could be saved. And it says that he condemned the world by doing that. So obeying God is so important. And I just want to go on and continue here. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24 that the world did not know until the flood came and took them all away. Now, before the flood came, God brought all of the animals and Noah and his family into the ark. Now, this is a picture of the rapture. It was 7 days before and 7 years before the end of time. If you are in the ark, if you are doing what God tells you to do, and you are where God tells you to be, then 7 years before the end of time, you also will be carried away. We will be raptured, taken up, and the rest of the world will not know. The wrath of God through the tribulation is going to be poured out, and they're not going to know. It's going to take them all away. And Jesus said, this is exactly the way that it's going to happen. So I want you to notice that Noah was 500 years old. He had triplets, and he and his wife had a big job to do. And Noah did part of it by himself. Noah raised his sons up, and they got married. And then Noah and his wife taught his sons and their wives about the things of God, and they all worked together doing the will of God, preparing the ark, building the ark, gathering food for themselves and all of the animals, doing all of this work. They did not put their hands into the world. They put their hands to the plow in the vineyard of God. Now I want to point out here in Matthew chapter 24, verses 44 through 46, Jesus said, and this is, all the same chapter of Matthew, therefore, so if you go back and read all of these things that are going to come to pass, he says, because of all of these things, therefore, be ye also ready. So in other words, we need to be ready. For in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man comes. Now listen, my brothers and my sisters, Jesus is talking about the rapture here, okay? Because if you read, in these verses, he talks about 2 will be in the field, 1 shall be taken, the other left. Even Christians, Jesus is talking to Christians. He's talking to his disciples in an hour that you do not think, okay? Jesus is coming. Jesus is coming. And he says, therefore, you also be ready, just like it was in the days of Noah. Noah had a time limit, okay? Noah had a deadline. He couldn't hem-haw around. He didn't have time to do all of these things. He had a job to do, and he needed all hands on deck. And I ask a question, on this teaching, what's wrong with the church? What's wrong with the world? Is there something that we should be doing? Well, everybody has heard, preaching about that, as it was in the days of Noah and as it was in the days of Lot and all of these things. And a lot of people talk about Nephilim and fallen angels and all of that junk. Well, it's all really a bunch of baloney, because the common theme between the days of Lot, which was Sodom and Gomorrah, and the common theme of the days of Noah is family. Okay, it's impossible for an angel to actually have a sexual relationship with a human being. Okay, there was only one virgin birth, and that was with Jesus. There is no other angel that has the ability to reproduce in a human. It's all a bunch of baloney. It's a heresy. And so, but they all have a common thread, and that theme is family. Okay, Sodom and Gomorrah, people were no longer marrying, okay, according to God's standard. In the days of Noah, the sons of God, which were children of God, saw the daughters of men. They stopped getting married. They stopped waiting for God to bring them their spouse, and they chose wives of whom they wanted. And now in Matthew 24, Jesus says the same thing. As it was in the days of Noah, they will be eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage. And there's nothing wrong with getting married. The problem is that we, or mankind, is picking. Church members, people who claim to be Christians, are not waiting for God. They are not waiting for the one that he chose for them. They are going out and picking, and they are becoming unequally yoked together with unbelievers. And so Jesus said, therefore, be ye also ready. We need to be ready. That means we need to be exactly in God's will, doing exactly what God said to do, and don't get outside of it. Because if Noah would have missed it just a little bit, God is very merciful, but when the flood came, it came. Okay, and if Noah wasn't ready, it's over. God can't change his timeline. And so, my brothers and my sisters, Jesus said, who then is a faithful and wise servant? Okay, this is what we are to be doing. Okay, Jesus told us to make disciples. He didn't tell us to go to church. And even though we need to pray, it's time for the church to get off of their knees and get out into the world and start preaching the gospel. Jesus said, who is that faithful and wise servant whom his Lord has made ruler over his household to give them meat in due season? Verse 46, blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. It doesn't say that Jesus will return and find his people praying. It says that he should return and find his people doing. So, my brothers and my sisters, is the church just continuing having church? Yes, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Maybe a few people have added, maybe a few people are coming, but overall, what's happening? Nothing is changing. And what are God's plans? What is God trying to do? It's his church. What is God? And so we need to be like Noah, and God gives us deadlines. He gives us timelines, and he has an agenda that he wants it done on a certain, because he's come back on a certain, and so we need to be ready, because when he comes back, we should be blessed as servants. That means slaves to the Lord. And will he find us doing? It says, whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find so doing. Doing what? Well, in verse 45, it says, who is the faithful and wise servant whom his Lord has made ruler, okay, over his household? We are rulers over the household of God. It doesn't mean church. There was no such thing as a church building when this was written, okay? But it says to give them meat in due season, okay? That means that we are to feed people God blesses us so that we can give to others. This is spiritual. This is revelation. This is teaching. This is physical. This is natural. What is the household? What is the household? Is it the church? Yes, it's part of the church, but it's also your home. It's your home. And that's what Noah was doing. He was giving meat to his sons. What is meat? Jesus said, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me. So to give them meat, food in due season, means for us to know the will of God and to be doing it, and to teach others to do the same, to teach our own house to do the same thing. That household in every church across America is actually doing the will of God. Can you imagine? It would change America. It would change this nation. So my brothers and my sisters, I ask you, I beseech you by the mercies of God that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice and get on that altar and let the Lord consume you and find out what is the will of God. And then do it, no matter what. Because if we're not ready, we will be left. Okay? Jesus said, I really would like to take those 5 foolish virgins, but I can't. Okay? There's a vessel that the Lord's going to take us up into heaven. Okay? It's a chariot. And just like Elijah told Elisha, if you do not see me taken up, you will not receive the mantle. You will not receive the double portion that you have. Well, my brothers and my sisters, there is a chariot of fire that is coming to take us up. And if you are where you're supposed to be, okay, 2 were in the field, but one of them was not where they were supposed to be, and they were left. So I encourage you, please, please find the will of God and get in it as fast as you possibly can. God bless.